With that, we'll need to move to an approval of the agenda, and we're going to add an item to the consent agenda. And Bob, would you give some explanation on that, please?
Yes, everyone's place today, you will see proposed addition to our consent agenda as agenda item 18.I, entitled Amended 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan and Transportation Improvement Program. It's the regional conformity assessment that's required. Sir, we would recommend approval of today's agenda with that addition to the consent item.
All right, board members, you've heard the need this morning. Can I get an approval of the agenda as amended?
So moved. Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no, and it is carried. Thank you so much. We'll move now to our public comments. Mr. Crum, do we have any comments today?
No submitted public comments in advance of today's meeting, but I would pause and ask if any members of the audience would like to address the HRTPO board this morning.
All right, well, seeing none, we'll close the public comment period. And now we'll move to agenda item number 4. And Mr. Crum, that's your executive director's report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, included in your agenda was my monthly executive director's report. Happy to respond to any questions. One item I would like to touch on, I think most board members will be aware, but just in case, obviously, this General Assembly session, an item that's remained as an important regional legislative priority, deals with toll relief at the Elizabeth River crossing, downtown and midtown tunnels. As you all know, it's been quite a deliberate process. There's the potential for a reconvened session. But I did want to report where the budget conferees did end up related to the ERC toll relief. The proposed 2-year budget includes a total of $101 million to come to Hampton Roads for toll relief at the ERC facilities. The budget includes $77 million in year 1 of the 2-year budget, and another $24 million in year 2, all from the general fund, for a total of $101 million. Now, what would happen is that money would be used to expand toll relief for drivers who earn less than $50,000 per year. So when you combine that, and of course the TPO has its ERC task force that's done some advocating. When you combine that with the existing toll relief program, what that would mean is that for people that make less than $50,000 per year, they would receive 14 free trips per week through the ERC through the year 2036. So under 50,000, 14 free trips per week through the facility through the year 2036. So we'll continue to monitor and keep everyone up to date on that. But that's, and one more item, sir, if I may, my apologies. I did want to take a moment and introduce a new staff person that we have. Marquet, would you mind standing up, please? So this is Marquet Hall. Marquet is our new technology manager at the HRPDC and HRTPO, doing a super job for us already. If you get a chance, I'd appreciate if you could say hello to Marquet today, introduce yourself, but could we please welcome him to the team, please? That's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Crum. Marquet, welcome. And I'm sure you'll be diving into some wonderful challenges in that area. So we appreciate already the heavy lift you will be doing.
We told Marquet there were no technology challenges, right?
Yes, all right. Now, moving now to agenda item number 5, we'll go to our updates, a CTB update. Mr. Stant, good morning.
Good morning. We had a meeting earlier this week. I have to tell you, it was the shortest meeting in my 3-year history, so I have very little to report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. How short was that meeting? It was short.
It was over by lunch.
All right, well, it's always good in some respects. Item number 6, VDOT. Mr. Hall, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair. A couple of updates. Happy to report we're just about 850 feet left on for mining for the first tunnel. So we're still on track for a mid to late April breakout on North Island. So that'll be big event, good news there, as well as opening up our North Trestle eastbound traffic, and that is also scheduled for later in April, early May. So a lot of activity coming up here in the next couple months on the expansion project. As many of you know, we have segment 2 now open for tolling. All reports that's operating as designed. We do have a lot of material. I know our communications folks have been engaged pretty heavily with all our localities, our military installations, other key stakeholders on getting out the information on Easy Pass and Easy Pass Flex. So if you are in need of any of that information, please make sure you're reaching out to us, and we'll continue to make sure we're pushing that information out as much as possible. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Now, item number 7, DRPT update. Mr. Trogan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everybody hear me? We, as Mr. Stan was saying, we've been heavily into drafting our 6-year improvement program, scoring projects, prioritizing them. So that's been our last few months. So in anticipation of the draft 6-year plan, it will be unveiled at the April 16th CTB meeting, I believe. So, and then of course, after that, they'll begin being the 6-year improvement program hearings around the state. So we've just been in preparation for that. Just one item for, any interest is there's a bus and bus facilities program and low-no emission program through FTA that is right now open. I think applications close in April, but that was the one that in the last year, HRT had a tremendous amount of success. I think got 25 million out of the program. Suffolk has gotten some in the past, and a few other agencies in Virginia. So, if there's interest, we at DRPT are trying to help support all the applications we can to bring in that federal discretionary funding. So that is imminent though. So if there's any interest in that, and this is a small one, but I think I was actually in Essex County probably, but recently we just had a ribbon cutting with Bay Transit, which serves, Gloucester area, and they have a partnership with VCU Health that they're helping pay for a pilot program to help around Tappahannock to get people to doctor's appointments and stuff. So it was a nice event for one of our smaller agencies around the area in Bay Transit. So thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the update. Item number 9, VPA update. Chris Gullickson. Good morning.
Chairman, couple items to address this morning. At the last meeting, I know Ms. Vick discussed the widening of the channels. That has officially been announced. Our channels here at the Port of Virginia are now some of the widest shipping channels on the entire U.S. East Coast, allowing for the two-way transit of the ultra-large container vessels. So we were very excited about the progression of that project, and obviously target a final completion of the deepening of that project towards the end of 2025. Also at Norfolk International Terminals, the North Optimization Project is well underway. We are well into civil works there at NIT, and targeting a phase 1 completion with the new volume capacity coming online towards the end of 2025. We continue to see bright spots in the overall volume levels as cargo is coming back and continuing to do well here in Virginia. But also one of the things we're really beginning to see is some of those projects outside the gate actually coming to production. And so one that really stands out in my mind, and I know from Mayor Glover and the staff in Portsmouth, there on Wild Duck Lane, to see a high flow cross dock facility come into production on a site that was once a coal-fired power plant next to Virginia International Gateway. And that is, I think, a really sound type of project that is going to really benefit from its proximity right next door to VIG, but more importantly, the investments that's brought to the city of Portsmouth, as well as the new job opportunities for the citizens. Subsequently, we're seeing a lot of development activity outside the gates, both in the western parts of Hampton Roads, as well as up on in James City County and areas on the peninsula. Had the good fortune this morning to city manager and mayor and councilwoman in the city of Chesapeake. We had staff from the planning department visit Norfolk International Terminals. So we actually, that was the reason for my tardiness. I apologize, but we had about 8 or 9 individuals from planning who took the time to visit NIT, and that's an open invite. We always want to put out there to all the Hampton Roads communities and to their planning and development staff to show sort of that inside the gate perspective and get a better understanding of the investments that your port, our port is making, and how that's driving the development that so many of these communities are addressing and seeing. So I'll leave my remarks there. Happy to respond to any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the port? All right, seeing none, thank you so much, and it's always good to hear the progress there and you guys making history, so thank you so much. Now, item number 10, our transit agency updates. We'll move to the HRT with Mr. Harrell. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Traffics and HRT are teaming up with the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation on a month-long campaign to help local businesses bring their employees back to the office. Connecting businesses gives employers access to tools they need to navigate a changing workforce. The campaign highlights the benefits of van pooling and other forms of transit to commute to work, as well as solutions to free up spaces in congested parking lots. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very good. We'll move now to the WADA update. Mr. Scalia, good morning, sir. Good to see you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Great news that, last month when I presented, talked about our Northern Transfer Facility, still looking for funding. Recently with the federal partial budget approved, that did include a $3 million earmark for that transfer center. So very excited to announce that. Would like to thank James City County for having put in for that year plus ago. And also good news, thank you to the Transportation Programming Subcommittee for approving $110,000 for us to purchase our first hybrid support vehicle. So look forward to getting that into our fleet. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Move now to item 11, our FTAC update. Mr. Everly, good morning, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. 4 items this morning. The first one is we received an update from Aaron Belt from the Virginia Department of Transportation Office of Sustainable Transportation, discussing the efforts that are being put in place to improve light, medium, and heavy-duty charging infrastructure around the Commonwealth. Her presentation was very interesting, and we got to learn a little bit about some grants that may become available and efforts that are being made to increase the number of grants that may be available to us. After that, there was a very robust discussion about charging and infrastructure and some other challenges related to EVs, especially with regards to the length of time it takes to charge an EV, which affects hours of service for truck drivers, and the greatly increased weight of an electric truck, and whether exemptions may be required to the gross weight limits. And then third, there's a substantial increase in the amount of tire wear that occurs with these vehicles, which creates a substantial amount of particulate matter that ICE vehicles do not. And that is, that's going to raise some other issues for the Environmental Protection Agency, we think. In June, at our June meeting, we will be looking to prepare a resolution and vote on it to add Route 58 to the list of routes that are eligible for EV infrastructure funding. Currently, that route is completely left out of the plans at the federal level, and it is a significant route that is important to Virginia and would make a significant difference in pollution if it is added to the network. Second item, we're starting our work on the 2050 LRTP. We last time around had about 70 projects that we sorted through and ranked and recommended. This time we expect at least as long a list, but as a result of our work, we are planning to narrow things down to 5 key projects that will produce the most bang for the buck for our region. And then the next item, we talked about I-87 as an alternate route and where that project stands both in Virginia and North Carolina. It becomes a more interesting discussion with the substantial growth in Suffolk and the traffic issues and the number of lights and other things. And as we know, Suffolk is working on hopefully finding a bypass route. But I think that I-87 corridor is going to become more important as we go, and FTAC wants to be prepared to be able to provide meaningful input in the future. And then last week, we talked about rail crossing study that's going on. There's a substantial number of rail crossings in our area, and we provided some input to the staff on ways to perhaps help pick out the ones that really require the most priority because there are such a huge number of them. Thank you for the time. Apologize for being a little long today.
You're fine, sir. Thank you so much for the update. We'll move to item 12, our CAC update. Mr. Yatrovsky, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The Community Advisory Committee has not met since our last meeting of the TPO, but the Bylaws Subcommittee continues to meet monthly to examine some structural changes. Hopefully, it will improve the efficiency and efficacy of the organization. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Move to item number 13, our military liaison updates and United States Navy. Captain Deese, good morning, sir.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chairman. I see my fellow services have left me alone here again, as always, it appears. First, I want to thank the entire group for the partnership we've seen over the years. The investment you make back in the base is our investment in your future. I want to specifically thank Mayor Jones right now for the work we're doing over at Newport News. You know, we did explore many COAs, sorry, I try not to use our acronyms, many, different alternatives that we could look at in terms of how do we solve our housing challenges that we have over there. And that work with the state and the city to both find offsets in terms of changes with regulations, as well as the $40 million proposal that's on the table, makes it a much more likely decision by the Navy, and we're still waiting from the CNO and SecNav level to put that investment back in the community. And that investment from you and us and from the state and us and your advocation for that is not just an investment in the largest economic agent in this area, but it's an investment in your future workforce and your future communities. And I think that's incredibly important because when they have positive experiences, they live here each and every day. And the more that they're embedded in the community, it means that they want to stay here that much more. So we appreciate that investment. We look forward to hopefully growing that in the future so that more and more of those citizens who live here want to stay here when they choose the wrong path and leave the Navy, but do enter a new journey in their adventure there. In that same regard, we continue to work with IGSAs. Shockingly, the Navy's not great at everything. The Department of Defense, we have incredible skills, but sometimes it's not everything. And one of those is in that really public infrastructure. We have incredible skills in certain elements, but there's a lot of parts that we simply do not do all the time. And so when we run into a challenge, and I'll give an example from Connecticut, when they had a large sinkhole open up at that main gate, their ability to reach into Connecticut Department of Transportation to do some underground repair took something that was $1 million plus, probably 6 months of us planning it because that's where it would fit in us and our cost, and made it, we can do that in a month and it's $250,000. So we're continuing to explore that with each and every one of you. We appreciate the support we've seen to date, and we look forward to working with VDOT and the rest as more opportunities become available, because they really benefit both of us. Your expertise can make our life much better, and we're happy to leverage that knowledge that you have. And then again, it goes right back to making that life for the sailors better each and every day, which makes them want to become a continued member of this incredible community in the years to come. So thank you again, and appreciate everything.
Thank you, Captain. I think you just shared something with us that probably shattered all of us, where you said the Navy's not good at everything you do. And
Better than the Air Force and the Coast Guard. But,
I figured you'd want to clarify.
We have skill sets that we're we're good at breaking things better than we are sometimes putting them back together. So,
well, thank you for your moment of transparency. We'll move now to item number 14, airport representatives updates, and Sheila Ward is here with Norfolk. Good morning.
Good morning. Norfolk International Airport continues to do well. Traffic at Norfolk International Airport has exceeded record levels. February passengers count was nearly 300,000. To be exact, it was 298,452. That is a 13.2% increase versus February of last year. This was the airport's busiest February ever and 13th consecutive new monthly record. Through the first 60 days of 2004, our traffic is up nearly 12%. And that's notable considering in 2023, that was ORF's busiest year. So in partnership with Virginia Tourism Corporation, Norfolk is now home of Virginia's newest LoveWorks display. This display is located in the baggage claim at ORF. It contains an augmented reality feature that lets visitors use their smartphones to observe animated planes and clouds encircling the sign. The O in the sign is actually shaped like our new logo. So we're looking for this spring, ORF will introduce a new kids play area. That's an amenity that will certainly please those traveling with children. And lastly, our team is currently in Bogota, Colombia, on a recruiting trip for additional air service to ORF. Next week, we expect an announcement of new service that will connect Norfolk to a previously unserved city in Western United States. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. And I think what we're hearing, yeah, give him a hand. Very good. I think what we're hearing is the excellence that you all do, the Navy could learn from you. So
You know, I've got an airport too. Actually, I have two,
what?
you know, so we're darn good over
See,
there.
we're passing olive branches all over this morning. That's a great thing.
Us Marines will take care of things.
And I hear they pick you up all the time. But anyway, moving, you go say that. It's always good to laugh, folks. Life's too short and it gets crazy. And if you ever have a moment of crazy, I'm sure they'll let you come play on the new kids' place there at the airport. You can take a break. So, all right, moving to agenda item number 15. And Bob, I'll turn it over to you to set that up for us.
Yes, we're going to have Dale Stith, our principal planner who manages our long-range transportation planning program, provide the HRTPO board a briefing on sort of a status of where we are with the LRTP update and what's to come, because the next 18 months or so are going to be really critical in this process. So Dale, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's been a while since I've been up here, so lots of new faces. Seems like during the 2045 LRTP approval process, I was up here every month. So today I'll be providing an overview of the long-range transportation planning process, where we are in developing the 2050 LRTP, and some upcoming action items. So for new people in the room, the long-range transportation plan is the region's transportation blueprint. It's for a 20-year horizon that's going to guide transportation investments for our region. And these would be multimodal investments, not just highway investments. The plan identifies affordable and resilient priorities for the region. It includes a lot of input from the public and from our technical stakeholders. And this plan is updated every 5 years, and that's so that we can account for changing priorities and conditions. So essentially, once one LRTP is updated, staff is fast working on the next long-range transportation plan. The graphic on the right kind of shows those high-level steps of how we develop a long-range transportation plan. We assess current conditions, then we forecast growth for the plan horizon. So this one would be for the year 2050, assess those future conditions, then evaluate and prioritize recommendations across multiple scenarios. And I'll get into that in a little bit as I go through this presentation, and then identify a funding plan for these projects. So this graphic shows the relationship between a vision, long-range transportation plan, and our TIP relationship. So essentially, a vision plan would be our wish list for the region, the needs that we have identified. To give you an idea, for our 2045 long-range transportation plan, we had identified over $70 billion in transportation needs. The region doesn't get this much money to actually fund all of that. So the long-range transportation plan looks to prioritize what can we afford in a 20-year period. So for the 2045 LRTP, what we could afford was about $15 billion. We actually identified $30 billion for the region, $15 billion is reserved for maintenance, and then that other 15 is for new construction. And then that sets the stage to move projects into our 4-year TIP program, which essentially moves projects closer to construction. It's important to note that regionally significant projects need to be included in a long-range transportation plan before they advance to construction. So this slide here shows that there's a lot of regional collaboration. I've listed most here, but it's not exhaustive. You know, obviously we have federal, state, and local government staff helping us. We have our various advisory committees, the transit agencies. Of course, the public is critical in our process, and then other community groups and special interest businesses across the region provide input into this process. This slide shows some examples of transportation projects that we would include in a long-range transportation plan. We don't have to include every project because when you're thinking about a 20-year period, that's a lot of projects. So we're only including those regionally significant projects. So in terms of highways, these would be, you know, your major roads, of course, interstates, some, you know, major primary and secondary roads. For transit, we're looking at fixed guideway projects or, you know, transit system projects. And then for bike and ped, because again, we want to be multimodal, we're evaluating regional trails across Hampton roads. So these are typical funding sources that we include in a long-range transportation plan. Most in this room are very familiar with our regional funds. That would be the, you know, through HRTPO, that would be the Hampton Roads Transportation Fund and the Hampton Roads Regional Transit Fund. Also the funding programs through Smart Scale, the district grant, and high priority projects. These are funding assumptions that we use to constrain the long-range transportation plan. Of course, we have federal funds, the RSTP, CMAQ, transportation set aside. There's safety, bridge funds, highway funds. You know, there's various different federal and state funds. Sometimes we get local funds from localities, of course, tolls, and it's hard to see with that yellow font, but even new funding sources. If we get a new regional, state or federal funding source, then the projects those funds can go to have to go through our LRTP process. So our approach to developing the 2050 is a very structured approach, and I've shown the main components here on this slide. We do use exploratory scenario planning because when we're looking 20 years out, we know that there's a lot of uncertainty, and we want to make sure that the region's prepared for this uncertainty. We also have a very robust data-driven project prioritization tool that evaluates our candidate projects. For the 2050, we're enhancing some of our considerations in terms of resiliency, vulnerability, equity, and accessibility. So I think you guys are on the PDF, and this is going to mess up my animation instead of using the PowerPoint slides. So I don't know if Thank you, I appreciate that. Sorry, I'm trying to entertain you guys with some of my animation, and I realize that it's not happening. Yeah, no, I don't want to put everyone to sleep here. So. While they pull that up, I'll talk about scenario planning. And essentially, you know, what we've realized is when we're trying to plan out for 20 years, we know that we don't know what's going to happen. When you think about a circle of knowledge, you know, maybe we've thought about 25% of that unknown, and then we recognize that there's another 25% that we know that we don't know, but the rest of that knowledge circle we haven't even thought of yet. So when we're trying to plan a transportation system for the future, we need to have a structured approach that says we recognize that we don't know what's going to happen, and instead of trying to predict one future, what we're going to do is try to prepare for a range of possibilities. And that graphic on the right is saying it's not about hitting the bullseye on a dartboard, but instead it's about covering that dartboard. So these are high-level planning milestones. And that's just, again, to show you that we have a very structured process, and we are essentially almost a little bit more than halfway through developing that framework for the plan that's going to guide the evaluation of transportation projects. And we've started to collect some needs to evaluate, which I'll get into in a little bit. So this is the fun part, where we are. So back in November of 2022, this board approved that forecast for the 2050 horizon, which includes assumptions for future population and employment. And we have been currently working with your staff to allocate that forecast to transportation analysis zones. These are small geographies that we use to forecast future traffic. We've also been working with your staff to develop a vision and goals for the plans. One of the things that we've heard from our past efforts is we've got a very technical approach. So we're trying to simplify the message of our approach. Not simplify what we do, but just simplify that message. So our draft vision is essentially just transportation for all, right? That is our goal. You know, in terms of what we're trying to do, we want to make sure this transportation system is safe and secure, that this supports a strong economy, provides good connections, is resilient, sustainable, and equitable. Now, with scenario planning, we've had several surveys and lots of meetings with your staff to develop some scenario assumptions. Again, this is trying to prepare for the future. So in addition to our baseline, which is based off locality comprehensive plans, we've also prepared storylines for 3 greater growth scenarios. And just very high level, these 3 greater growth scenarios are going to look at, you know, what happens if more growth continues to occur in urban areas versus what happens if more growth is going to occur suburban and be more dispersed. And also historically, we've seen that growth has moved inland. So we're going to explore that a little bit more and say, you know, with sea level rise assumptions and even working from home, what does that do to travel patterns if growth continues to move inland? In terms of regional needs, we've had several studies and been, again, coordinating with several committees to collect ideas for candidate projects. We also opened up a public candidate project portal that's been open since last summer, and it'll stay open until the end of this summer. I think we've collected about 35 or 40 public projects already. These projects will be vetted through each of your locality staff to make sure they are consistent with your comprehensive plans. Separately, we're going to have a technical candidate project portal for technical staff to be able to submit candidate projects that aren't already captured in one of our other efforts, along with some data that we need to evaluate these projects. This board, we're actually coming back in July to collect candidate projects and regional need suggestions as well. All of these candidate projects have to be vetted through our project prioritization process. We've got multiple tools that we use to evaluate what the project's utility, the economic vitality benefits of that project, and the project viability in terms of readiness and compatibility with surrounding land uses. And then finally, fiscal constraint. Again, the long-range transportation plan is not a wish list. So we have to be able to identify funds to cover the projects that we're recommending to include in the long-range transportation plan. So these are some upcoming approval items at our next meeting in May. We're going to ask this board to approve those baseline transportation analysis zone allocations, our regional scenario planning framework, and the vision and goals for the plan. And then, as I mentioned just a few slides ago, identifying regional needs, that's going to stay underway until the end of summer. And then in July, we're going to have a work session where we'd appreciate you guys rolling up your sleeves and giving us some ideas for candidate projects. So that concludes my presentation. I appreciate your patience while they switch the slides over, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Very good, and you handled that very well. I was waiting for you to make a joke against the Navy as we've been doing, but
No,
we didn't get that, so.
my dad
Would you
was
like
a
to
Navy
I was
man.
waiting for the same thing, just so
See,
you know,
we're
but
on
I
the
was
same
ready.
page.
Yeah.
Very good.
No, my dad was a Navy man 30 years. I couldn't.
Very
So.
good. I couldn't resist, folks. I couldn't resist. All right, we'll open the floor for questions or discussion this morning on the LRTP 2050, folks. When I was a kid, 2050 seemed like a date that we were looking at that would be flying Jetson cars all over the area, and we're not doing that. But boy, 2050. Mayor Glover, do you have something that you wanted to discuss on the LRTP?
Yes.
I apologize. During the discussion about the Navy and the interaction, I got lost in some of that stuff. I do. So as the HRTPO staff proceeds to evaluate some of the projects over the next year for the updated long-range transportation plan, I would like to request that a planning and feasibility study that looks at the potential expansion for light rail from Norfolk to Portsmouth be considered as a candidate project. This is something that we've talked about, but I think the timing is absolutely right now. I realize that planning this feasibility study is the first step in considering the idea, but I believe that now is the time truly to start looking forward in a proactive manner to consider the feasibility of this potential opportunity. So that's what I wanted to add. Thank you, sir, for that time.
Mr. Crum, what would the procedure be on adding something like that from a member that brings it to the commission?
So, what that would be is it would become one of our candidate projects that they'll reference. So, and this is really important. Thank you, Mayor Glover. And this is why we need all of your input. We would place that project on Dell's list. She's going to be formally making this request of all of you for candidate projects. What are your ideas? They all go into the evaluation process. And Mayor Glover, perfect timing, because this is that time to look at what our vision is for transportation in the future. So we would add that into the list and get it into our process where we rank and prioritize all those. And this feasibility analysis could be part of that. The other thing I wanted to mention, Mr. Chairman, Dale had mentioned a work session for you all in July. And I did want to, Dale, we'll give them a little bit without all the information, right? But we're gonna approach the TPO meeting just a little different in July. We're gonna break the room up into small groups, small table conversations, and we're gonna have Dale and Kyle's maps out in front of you. And we're going to be asking you to help us identify projects just like Mayor Glover just identified, but other projects that you want us to be considering in this LRTP update. So we're really looking forward to that type of a work session format for this TPO board in July, sir.
Very good. Any questions, or if there would be any opposition to that being added? Any questions about that, Mayor Alexander?
No opposition whatsoever, but I would caution that we look at the arrangements with the Elizabeth River crossing to make sure that we don't inadvertently create a compensatory event.
Very good point. Well taken. Thank you, Mayor. All right. Any other questions or recommendations for Dale at this time? All right. Seeing none, Dale, thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll look forward to the work session together in July. And Bob, with that, we'll move to item number 16, and I'll let you set that one up for us as well.
Yes, at last month's HRTPO board meeting, the conversation was brought up by board members again about whether or not, looking forward into the future, this region wanted to consider the formation of a primary and secondary road fund. And following that discussion, staff was directed to place this item on today's agenda to provide the board a little bit of background information on what the primary and secondary road fund, how it might be structured, what it could provide in terms of benefits for our region, recognizing that this is step one of a long-term conversation. But with that direction from the board, Dr. Partha Sarathy and I have worked together to prepare this PowerPoint overview. I'm going to ask Pavitra to come on up to the podium, which he's always a step ahead of me, and go ahead and provide the HRTPO board this briefing. And then when Pavitra is complete, of course, we have Kevin Page, I believe, in the audience with us today from HRTAC, who's here as a resource as well. So, Mr. Chairman, turn it over to Pavitra for the briefing to the board.
Very good.
Good morning. As Bob said, this agenda is based on a direction from the board. My presentation is not going to be as animated as Dale, and I don't have a Navy joke. So with that background, I thought, just as a context, I think one thing that we see in our region in the last decade or so is so much investments in the interstate system. And I think that's just a testament to the region coming together. So you see this number, nearly 200 lane miles of I-64 improvements. While we've made strides in addressing interstate needs, one thing that we keep hearing and we all know is looking at the primary and secondary roads that feed into the interstate system, right? These roads play an important role. They help us access the interstate. They provide, a lot of activities around these roadways, and in some cases they are evacuation routes. So what we wanted to do today is talk about what are some options and a path forward depending on how the board wants to go ahead with this dedicated funding. So I think in 2013, the General Assembly took a significant legislation that they passed. For a long time, we knew there were a lot of needs. We just didn't have the funding to address those needs. So in 2013, what the General Assembly did was give the region authority to additional sales tax and gas tax. And that revenues from those additional taxes was placed in a Hampton Roads Transportation Fund, or HRTF. What the legislation also specified that this money was very specific. It is for new construction projects on new or existing highways, bridges, and tunnels. And they were very clear this is where the money needs to be used. And then General Assembly followed this with the creation of HR TAC. So in 2014, they created HR TAC. They said, okay, HR TAC, use the money from HRTF, leverage and finance these revenues. Again, there was specific legislation that said the money from these HRTF revenues goes towards congestion reduction for the greatest benefit for the greatest number of residents. So they were very clear, it's bridges, tunnels, highways, and congestion reduction. So the way we worked over the last decade is, as Dale just came up, and that's why we wanted Dale to go first, as part of our long-range transportation plan, we work in very close coordination with our localities, VDOT, and other stakeholders in identifying and prioritizing the projects. And then once we have a list of regional priority projects, HR Tax able to take that and leverage the money and help fund those investments. And what that has meant is a lot of the construction that you see on the roadways today. Following these two decisions, the TPO board took another significant action, and I'm not going to read the entire action, but what it was the board decided and endorsed a list of regional priority projects that they thought should advance to receive the HRTF revenues. So what is the impact of all these decisions is this table you see right here. Within a year and a half, segment 1 got completed. And by December 2021, 3 segments on the peninsula of I-64 were widened. You come down to the south side, look at I-64, 264, phase 1 and phase 2 are wrapped up. As Chris said during his briefing, the south side and high-rise bridge widening 9 miles all the way from our offices in Greenbrier to Bowers Hill interchange. And of course, the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel under construction. And we also have the Hampton Roads Express lanes under construction. So we had a lot of investments happening in our interstate system. So in 2020, state legislation also authorized the first time ever regional funding, or dedicated funding for regional transit. And again, the funds for this is placed in the Hampton Roads Regional Transit Fund, managed by HR TAC. HRT has been working very closely to implement these revenues. It's going to be the 757 Express 15-minute frequency on a core network of transit routes across the region. So this is, again, a huge step for us because this is the first time we had dedicated funding on transit. So the reason we gave you this context is a lot's happened in the region since 2013. But I think, as we already talked about, the primary and secondary roads have needs as well. During Dale's presentation, she talked about the vision plan. So we always have projects that we receive as part, either from the public, from our technical stakeholders, ongoing studies and other planning efforts. And when we identify these projects, we score them, we evaluate them, we prioritize them, then look at how much money can we afford. So based on that, the projects that go into our fiscally constrained long-range plan, but then the regional transportation vision plan has all those projects that are still really good projects. It's just that we do not have the financial resources to cover them. So if you look at the regional transportation vision plan, over 150 projects. Now, not all of them are on primary, secondary roads. This is the entire transportation system. But if you look at the needs, I think Dale said 70 billion, so over about 60 to 70 billion. So the question that gets asked is there a need? And I think we're able to say there's definitely a need. We have a lot of needs on these primary and secondary roads. The other question that gets asked is what are the types of projects that could get funded? Now, what you see there is not the projects selected, it's just an illustrative example of the types of projects. And why we wanted to put this information is, as we said, when the interstates have a certain purpose, but these primary and secondary roads have a different purpose. So Independence Boulevard in Virginia Beach, right, heavily trafficked. There are places along Independence Boulevard where there's some safety challenges. I know City of Virginia Beach won a grant to address the overpass over Independence Boulevard. So there's congestion, there's safety, there's future growth in the corridor. How do we make sure that the road is invested? We have enough investments in those corridors to meet these needs. Route 17, I think if you look at Chesapeake, it's the coastal Virginia Commerce Park or Williams Tract, the largest mega site, as the governor mentioned, one of the largest. So as that location starts attracting economic opportunities, how can the road be? What kind of investments would help that roadway? If you look on the peninsula, I mean, you see congestion, especially in the Newport News area on Route 17 near 64. Again, coming to 58, a huge freight corridor. We just heard from the port on all the successful updates that we received from the port. So there's a lot of growth in the port, which means there's a lot of freight movement. 58 over the last few years, you've seen a lot more of freight traffic taking 460 and 58. You have a lot of warehouse logistics centers. And now when you add Port 460, the fourth largest logistic park when completed. So you're looking at Route 58 and 460 having to take on such a huge freight movement. There's safety challenges on 460. So again, as I said, there's growth, there's freight, there's safety. What are the investments that could help? VDOT did an arterial management plan on 58 in 2019, trying to find a way to balance the corridor to see, okay, it provides access, but it's also movement, and it's an evacuation corridor. That's very important for our region. So if we move over to the peninsula, you'll see Route 199 near Jamestown, John Tyler Roadway, Victory Boulevard, Pocosin. It's a very important congested corridor, but it's also a very important corridor from an evacuation. If one of the roads shut down, evacuating is not going to be easy. Similarly, improvements at Fort Eustis and Jefferson, access to Fort Eustis and 264 continue to be important to the region. So when you look at criteria, as I said, the reason we went through each of those projects in detail is to make the case that while HRTF revenues were very specific, it's only for congestion, these roads serve a different purpose. So the criteria that you use to evaluate these projects could be broader. It could be making sure they tie in with economic development, safety, resilience. I think our region's at the forefront of climate change, sea level rise. What does it mean for these roads? How can we make sure they're resilient? Equity is the lens we apply to all our planning work, but are there some projects where improvements to transportation disadvantaged communities could be a good investment in criteria that we use? Obviously, there are other criteria that can be used to evaluate the projects. This is just an example of the types of criteria that we could use. The good news is, the question we get asked is, we need to develop a framework. The good news is we already do. The board direction, this is TPO board direction, the HRTPO project prioritization process. We've used it in the last 3 LRTP cycles. Dale talked about it. We call it the 3 legs stool. So there's utility, vitality, and viability. Within each of those legs, there are a whole bunch of measures that we use to evaluate. And you'll see some of the ones I talked about: safety, modal enhancements, economic distress factors. Those are already things we account for. I'm looking over at Dale. I think she said there were 75 plus measures within this tool. So yeah, I got that number right. So this spreadsheet tool is very robust, data driven. And what is good about this tool is it's also very flexible. So if the board decides that some criteria for this projects need to be weighed more, the tool is built in such a way that those criteria can be adjusted. So I think we have a good framework in place. And if the board decides to go in this direction, I think we already have a tool that can be applied. So in terms of timeline, obviously, we would need to work and get a General Assembly session is 2025. The next session, if that gets approved, in terms of the revenues, would begin July 2025. At this time, the estimate is 80 million a year, and this is what HRTAC would come in to leverage and finance these revenues and use it for those projects. So what I've talked so far is some of the background context, why there is a need, what types of projects. But we also thought it might be good to have a discussion, and I'll turn it over to Bob after this, is, we talked about the regional sales and use tax currently at 7/10 of a penny. So the question that the board might want to ask is, can we increase it to a full cent? And then if yes, is there an interest? And if it is yes, what are some of the steps we can take to best advocate for this ahead of next General Assembly session? With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob and have him lead.
Yes, thank you, Pavitra. Mr. Chairman, HRTPO Board, we're going to just leave these questions up on the screen. But Mr. Chairman, I think what we wanted to do is be responsive to the board's request that we frame this up for a conversation today, realizing there's no action being requested today. This is just an initial conversation to see what people's perspectives are. And I think that, Pavitra makes a great point. In the past, we've looked at congestion relief. This is perhaps an opportunity to look more broadly. We have an approach at HRTAC that is delivered, an approach that HRTAC that has worked. One option, Mr. Chairman, I might suggest is Kevin Page is here. And perhaps in advance of the board's discussion, maybe we could ask if Kevin has a few comments to add to supplement what Pavitra has presented to the board today. And then following Kevin's comments, we can open it up for a roundtable conversation.
Yeah, I think that'll be good. Mr. Page, thanks for being with us today. And I know Mr. Page is very well apprised of heavy lifts with transportation. So would you talk to us today about what this could look like and the variety of options that this type of a tool adds to our region?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the TPO. And thank you all for having this discussion today, because it's obviously, moving forward. When I'm looking from my capacity at HRTAC, I look at Northern Virginia and Central Virginia, and they have primary and secondary road funds carved out as what was part of their originating legislation, as well as some of the other regions of the Commonwealth on the last gas tax adjustment that we had statewide. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hall, but I think that the gas tax that was applied regionally to 3 regions of Virginia is actually applied by district statewide now for use at the district level for projects very similar to Link to Smart Scale. Saying, when I looked at that, and I sit down here as a guest to the meeting today, thank you for inviting me to the podium, is to look at kind of where we've been in the context of trying to start the conversation about what is a primary and secondary road fund for Hampton roads, and why don't we have one already? I think that's part of where I start that from both a vision and policy, and realizing that our major investment projects we had at HRTAC are so large and interstate driven for congestion relief. So when you look at, Mr. Chairman and members of the TPO and distinguished guests here today, when you look at, well, what could $80 million bring to the table? So we at HRTAC and our financial advisors sat down and looked at 42 projects that have been identified by VDOT as being ready to build and could be delivered by 2027. Looking at some of the capabilities of the district smart scale program, how we could leverage that. As you all know, we do a lot of leveraging at HRTAC. We took those 42 projects, which came in at $1.37 billion, and for $80 million a year, leveraged obviously through some bonding. And I see Mr. Rucker here today. Distinguished FHWA and Build America Bureau has helped us with our funds and the credits on HRBT, in particular on the 6 projects. Going to TIFIA for a junior TIFIA, a small one, which means not very big, only $553 million. But we're right now, by the way, TIFIA came to see us a couple of weeks ago, toured the HRBT project, and said that we were one of the largest regions in the United States customers of the Build America Bureau's program. So to the federal administration, kudos to them, but thanks to us for being their big customer. Also, we'd have some PAYGO there and some smart scale that we would look at as well. that could deliver $1.676 billion worth of projects by 2029. So part of that is obviously taking a group of projects backing into a number, what is 0.3 of a penny, to show you how we can obviously leverage that. But also maybe looking as well, Mr. Chairman, I might point out if I could just have some liberties here for just a second, going in a good place, is that there's a district smart scale program that's currently funded today. If a jurisdiction which competes with themselves, their colleagues, other jurisdictions, get a district award, it's usually what Mr. Stant, 6 or 7 years before those funds come to fruition. So that means that if a locality was awarded a district smart scale, either to be administered by Mr. Hall and his team or by the city jurisdiction that's a recipient, they have to wait 6 to 7 years for those funds. That right now, I think around 10% compounded construction escalation. Now, we're out borrowing money right now at HRTAC and below 5%, obviously. Tax exempts are far less than that. You know, is there some opportunity here for an infrastructure bank to be created if these revenues do come about, where we might be able to come in and partner with VDOT and the localities and have these projects that are going to have to sit for 7 years, because some of those will be unfundable or unachievable by the time the funds roll around. So we might be able to accelerate projects there as well. So I think there's some opportunities here. You know, obviously, what's the policy establish a greater vision of what we're trying to accomplish here, and then trying to work with our abilities, which we've got a really good proven track record working with VDOT on how to set forth a good construction schedule and planning, and as well as working with the TPO on the projects moving forward. But I will say the district smart scale program, I want to be clear in my thoughts on this to you all, is that each jurisdiction competes with each other for district smart scale projects. And I don't think in any way in our relationship conversations with VDOT or the financial advisors that I've had, nor with Mr. Crum and his team, we want to find a way to complement the ability for localities to still have the discretion to ask for funds and compete for funds on a district, basis, but also how we build a program that also can support that, but also bring forward a greater vision of how the region itself can tackle some of these bigger projects like US 58, 17 and industrial park development. So thank you.
Hey, just while you're up there, so we talked about there are 42 projects right now that are kind of hanging in the balance that we could theoretically, if we had this ability in our toolbox, could have these done by 2029 in that time frame. If something like that is not done, what would it look like as far as a timeline? And maybe Mr. Hall would have an idea of this. I didn't tee it up previously. If something like this is not done, how long would it be until those projects ever got finished or touched? Sorry to put you on the spot, but that's an important, that's an important part.
I'll take the place of the Navy on
Very
this
good.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, Mr. Chair, you're talking 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, it really gets back to, I think the benefit here is with HRTAC and the dedicated funding source we have now, when I have conversations with obviously our folks at central office and our contracting community and the other folks that are very integral in delivering this program, is there's a consistent flow of funds that can be planned for, and folks can invest in that. So without that, it's hard. We're always going to be beholden to ups and downs in the economy and how the state contributes funds. But I think with the income streams that we have now and projection, it could be, to answer your question, 15, 20 years.
And that's, of course, a best guess scenario, I'm sure.
Very, yeah.
Yeah. We won't hold you to that. But 1.37 billion is a lot of money. I know the state, I'm sure, doesn't have it to write a check for these projects, and these projects affect every single one of our municipalities. And I think it's a good thing for us to talk about. I know when it was first brought up and I started talking to supervisors in York County, talked to Mayor Duman and a couple of city council members there, several of you around the table this morning. And at first it was a kind of but then when we started seeing the heavy lift that this is able to accomplish for our region, the economic impacts, economic development from over the entire region, this is a huge deal. And so I would like to see if there's any questions or comments. Look, and I know these kind of things get politicized, but these affect our constituents, the safety of our regions, the road projects that, as you just heard, just in a hypothesis, some 20 years, and depending on cost, it could be even more of a crazy delay. What are some thoughts around the table as I know we continue to chew on this? I'd welcome some comments, Mayor Tuck.
Mr.
And
Chairman,
then I'll go to Mayor Jones.
members of the board. A number of thoughts come to mind. I'm not sure if they were pre-COVID or post-COVID, but I can remember when we were talking about the repairs to the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel and the need to repair those spans or trestles. And the concern was that you had General Assembly members pointing fingers at VDOT and maybe fingers pointing back the other direction because General Assembly controlled the money that VDOT needed to make those repairs, and VDOT kept saying they didn't have the money. And so I think about that. I think about former CTB member, now Secretary of Transportation Shep Miller, saying at one point that if we had gone for that full penny, all the different projects we could accomplish, but we didn't. And so I don't know how many dogs in the fight we have in the city of Hampton, although I was just scanning through here and I saw that we have a letter from, I think, Mr. Crum related to Coliseum Drive Extension, but I'm certain other communities, I know Supervisor Shepherd always advocates for Victory Boulevard. And again, I think post-COVID, you and I, Mr. Crum and I went to meet with some of the, I guess, elected officials over on the south side about 58 and improvements to that. So it seems that all of us probably have some projects that would benefit from this additional 0.3 of a penny. And I can imagine that when we talk about the number that would be available to us and all those projects, that we would pass on this. And I know that we are in a tax increase averse landscape, but I think that's minimal to what we could do to really improve just transportation and being able to do things on our own dime in our area. I think we control our own fate with that. And so I think we would lose an opportunity if we don't go move ahead with this.
Thank you, Mayor Tuck. Mayor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the youngest politician, I'm going to go ahead and ask the political question for Kevin, if that's okay. If we divert a portion of this HRTF, how's that going to affect the funding schedule for Monitor Merrimack and 664? It's top of mind for me.
Yeah, if I could answer that in two parts. First part is anytime there's an interruption in a dedicated funding stream that's heavily leveraged right now, we're about $2.5 billion in debt right now at HRTAC. And it starts to, the bondholders get concerned, your ratings go down. It's very hard for us to accomplish cash for capital, but also for debt service. Saying when I feel I'd like to make everyone aware of is that there was, if the Hampton Roads Transportation Funds are moved at this point, any diversion of that of future revenues, we're the way our debt financing model is operating right now. We're finding ourselves coming out of, you mentioned Mr. Rucker and the TIFIA loans. We start going into interest, greater than interest, but principal and interest payments now that high-rise bridge has been completed within the next 12 months. So what we're finding is that of the $5.14 billion that we have out there under construction, the $3.124 billion, about $2.5 billion of that has been in debt. And we've paid that much already out in these projects. So we're gonna have to pay those back. The other question to lead into that is that we would have to recover from that, obviously, either by canceling future projects or deferring them to try to get cash for capital and debt service. And in that case, our future projects would just continue to move to the right of the spectrum. Monitor Merrimack is something I've always brought up to say, okay, what's next on the horizon? That and the James River Bridge are our major water crossings. And, how do we make those improvements? And we're not yet at the point of trying to reach those. So, Mr. Crum, you may mention, I think they're probably in your vision plan. Is that correct? But they're probably in the vision plan because there is no financial capability of reaching them yet. So, Mayor, to your point, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to answer this, it will be further out of your reach, probably within our lifetime. And I know what my age is. I know you're the youngest, but you might find it at the end of yours, sir, but it'll be outside of my lifetime. I can assure you that.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No, I think Kevin answered that very well. As a reminder, our regional connector study has prioritized Monitor Merrimack. Now that will be fed in, of course, to the long-range transportation plan with all of these other projects that they'll mention for prioritization. But, to Kevin's point, without the money in there in the bank account to pay for them, they end up in our vision plan rather than our, let's call it our action plan.
Very good. Other comments?
Just very quickly, I should have spoken up. It was my first meeting when this, I believe, got tabled. And I was a little intimidated, but feeling a little better today. But I should have spoken up then because I agree, we are in a tax adverse situation. I know we're taking a lot of heat right now over our assessments, but I talked with a citizen today that said, but if you tell me where my money's going, I can support that. And for James City County, yes, 199, that is a huge issue for us at Jamestown. But the others are issues for us as well, because when we do studies about where our citizens work, not many work, as many go as come. So we know that many of those projects up there impact their commute every day. And so if for a little bit more of a tax increase, but showing what we're doing with that, I think that's where you make the difference.
Thank you, Ruth, for that, and point well taken. Other comments? Yes, sir.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Kevin, in your presentation, you appear to make a distinction between transportation projects that connect people to services and opportunities and transportation projects that reduce congestion. With this new funding source, are you suggesting that that will be available to be both of those criteria?
Yes, under this program, because it would be more of a local assistance, primary secondary road fund, as Mr. Rucker's probably alluding to, is that we do have the Hampton Roads Regional Transit Fund, which is an independent fund, and the HRTF, which is highway centric for congestion relief. On this case, in purpose, the conversation, again, this is a very high policy decision that needs to be made here regionally, but it certainly leaves the topic of conversation wide open as to what is considered to be transportation modal and would be capable of being achieved through this program if it comes to fruition.
Mayor West?
I think this is an awesome idea of how to meet some real needs that we could all benefit from. There's no doubt about that. I think the question that I have is, what is our strategy? Because regardless of what we think and what we think we can convince our constituents to believe in, unless you get a majority in the state legislatures to vote for this, then it's just not going to happen. And the worst thing I think we could do is to go make this request and fail, because once an idea is you don't win, I think it's harder to resurrect later. So I would like to see us maybe involve our local lobbyists to come up with some ideas about strategies and timing towards achieving this. I just think for us to make our requests through our normal process is probably a little risky. That's my suggestion.
A point well taken, and I think without going into the issues, we've had a particular issue that's been a concern statewide when it relates to schools. And every year for the last 3 years, I've been in Richmond and others have, and went the first year, the Republican side, great idea. Democrat side, terrible idea. The very next year, Republican side said, terrible idea. Democrat said, great idea. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what they're drinking up here. It just just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I
Um,
think any of us that have dealt with Richmond, we know that it's a volatile and inconsistent situation. There's no doubt. So that's why you have to kind of be right on the timing. I wasn't around when the regional taxes were implemented, but from my conversations I've had, I understand it was a real battle in Richmond and that it took some courageous delegates and senators to stand up for it. And I think we have to build that courage before we do the ask.
And to your point, Mayor West, is a great point. I think this region has demonstrated over time of what is capable with a region that has their act together, so to speak. The way we're able to manage certain heavy lifts right now that if they were left to other funding sources or management sources, I would say, probably speculate that they probably would not be getting done. And so I think that we've demonstrated that with our great staff at HRTAC, at the TPO and the PDC, because we're all in this together. I think we've demonstrated that we have the gift sets, the skill sets to be able to manage these heavy lifts. And I think that's in our favor. And I think we utilize our past successes and the things we've learned along the way as the tee off for
I
that.
agree 100%, but again, this is politics.
Point well taken. Other comments? Mr. Yatrovsky, I saw you earlier, and then I'll go to Mayor Dyer.
Thank you, sir. Transportation has a lot of friends who have influence. And so large amounts of money have been allocated for major transportation projects. The problem is that if you add on to the tax burden for more transportation, as others have stated here, you are going to foreclose options in terms of other improvements in the human sector, the human needs sector, schools certainly. And we also need to be mindful that as we go more and more into transportation improvements in a time of climate change, we may be facing a situation where those improvements will be negated in short order by recurrent flooding. So I'm less than enthusiastic about this prospect.
And your point is understood as well. Thank you, sir. Mayor Dyer?
Yeah, thank you. I think that, the reality is that, we as leaders live in a theater of perceptions. And, once again, I think a lot of the decisions we make have to be like cliff diving. We got to know when to, time to jump. And I guess when is this point in this environment, are we ready to time to jump? But that's not to be saying that the time wouldn't be more appropriate over the next year or two. But I can tell you that, we're wrestling with Virginia Beach right now, trying to, just to balance the books in a way that no matter what we do, budget time, this is, contact sport time, for all the localities. And, right now we're looking in Virginia Beach at $991 million in unmet city needs. And that doesn't even include schools. And the other days we had a review of our own road projects that are going to need significant updating and everything else. But the thing is, I think, what Rick said, if we can get our state partners on, board, I guess a little bit more and things like that. But, right now, we're telling all our department heads and everybody that, they really got to, button down and everything. And, but once again, it's a noble cause, but maybe the timing is not optimal right now.
Mayor Dyer, for your comments. Yes, sir.
Just very quickly, how much was that 3/10 of a penny gonna, if I'm missing the presentation, sorry, how much was 3/10 of a penny gonna raise?
I believe it was 80 million. 80 million per year. Yes, sir. And this by no means is something that we're sprinting at. This is a marathon, as other things are, to be able to have the conversation, at least be brave enough to start the conversation, which I appreciate. And then maybe somehow through the lines of communication with our state stakeholders, we're able to find solutions for these issues. Because as economic development continues in all of our localities and all of our region, the road infrastructure needs don't go away. They actually start to add up. But anyway, I'll stop there. Mayor Tuck?
Just one final thought, all due respect. And I had this addiction to Coca-Colas. I apologize, McDonald's Cokes. You know, they're like, I get a medium, it's $1.49. And on the Hampton side, I pay my tax, it's $1.69. And I go for a large, it comes to 2 or 3, and I can plan that out. But yet if I buy a Coke on this side, I pay 20 cents more. But with my addiction, I buy the Coke. You know, and so I just point that out because, you know, I don't know what the effect of a 3/10 of a penny really is, but if I want something, I do it. And I think for most of us, we don't really realize, we don't think about that 3/10 of a penny, you know, but I do think about getting my Coke on the Hampton side before I come over here because I'm going to pay 20 cents more. I'm paying attention to that. But, you know, I think it's a small matter. I can remember, I think it was 2005, 2006, or 2007 when we did that penny thing around here, and there were folks who were against it. And look how far it set us back as far as trying to get things done, because I think it was 2012, 2013 that the General Assembly allowed us to have the, you know, what we have in place now. And what impact, probably negative, happened to us as a region? What are the economic impacts of people in Hampton or people on the south side saying, hey, there's something on the south side I really want to see, but I'm not going to go over there because I can't guarantee how long it's going to take me to get back. And people on the south side thinking there's something in the peninsula I want to see, but I'm not going to do that because, again, how long it's going to take me to get back. And even when we come over here, we don't know what time we're going to get back over to the peninsula, but we come. And so I'm just thinking that rational individuals, when they consider those things and just getting around, and it's not to say anything against schools or anything else that's a need, but I think probably the most important thing for any of us is the ability to get around with convenience. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mayor Tuck. All the points are very well taken. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll just say, Mr. Chair, it's been very good discussion. I think perhaps what could be helpful is if staff could kind of lay out some preliminary steps in terms of getting feedback from our legislators, what discussion groups we need to have. You know, the interesting piece of this is it certainly has the ability to lessen some of the burden on municipalities if we do this correctly. But there are some significant steps that need to be taken to prepare for an important policy implementation.
And yes, sir, point well taken. And I'll kind of, first of all, thanks for your comments and feedback, and it's all well taken. I think from here, Bob and Mr. Page, if we could get some idea, I think it was mentioned, so what does that 3/10 of a penny look like? You know, if that's a question, figure out how to see what that number is. Folks are very gifted in staff and they can reach out and find those things. I think we're just having the continued conversation so that we don't forget about the things that we've talked about. And so staff understands it's something that at least a majority of the commission sees the need in to continue in the planning and the strategic moves that are necessary. Mr. Crum.
Yes, first I want to thank the board for initial conversation and reaction. You know, I heard a lot of things. Is the timing right? And I heard a suggestion where perhaps we collaborate with the legislative liaisons. I think Mayor West, you had brought that up, that maybe a good conversation with them about strategy for how to engage with our General Assembly members, beginning with our Hampton Roads Caucus, would be important. I think one of the first things we have to be sure about is, are we in unison, lockstep, in agreement as 17 that this is something that we want to do. But I think before you can make that decision, we owe you some more information. So, I think, you'd all have to look at your constituents. What does that mean to them in their life? What does 3/10 of a penny mean? We can look at that, bring some information back on that, and try to keep the conversation going.
I think that'll be good. One final comment, Mayor Alexander, we'll let you have
Thank you,
that.
Mr. Chairman. Interesting conversation. I would say that I'm not sure that you have 17 localities giving you direction to move in a direction that would raise taxes. So we need to be very careful that the narrative is not that we're seeking to engage our members of the legislature, that we are in lockstep in agreement that we want them to raise taxes, because at that point, they would ask us to take a vote. And I will guarantee you that I have not talked to my council, nor have I talked to the citizens of Norfolk about raising taxes for this idea. So we need to be very careful that we don't send the wrong message. Directing staff to start drafting memos and engaging members of the legislature that we are asking them to do this, because I don't think there's a consensus.
Okay.
And may I say then, Mayor Alexander, I completely agree. I think that it is unsettled regional policy right now. I view staff's direction as continued research for you. And that's why I said before we go to the General Assembly, and Mayor knows this better than anyone having been there, we need to be certain we are in agreement before we go to our General Assembly members. So what I just view our direction as is more research for you to help you make the decision, and that's going to be a process. And I think the mayor's right on point, and I don't view that. I think it's unsettled regional policy right now, differences of opinion, but still a good conversation, and I appreciate the direction.
Yeah, it's unsettled, and at no time has any directive been given to approach legislatures. It's to continue the conversation here so we know exactly what the lift is and what the capabilities are. So hope that's clear to everybody. And with that, Bob, if you'll tee up the next item, we just have a few moments to
Absolutely.
get through their agenda.
Well, again, thank you, everybody. And we're going to have John Mahaley come on up. John is your principal at the MPO, at the TPO, that deals with our financial management piece of transportation, but also does a lot of work in terms of allocation of various funds, one of which he'll talk about today. So John, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Bob, and thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to thank the board and everybody in this room for one thing this morning. For about the cost of Mayor Tuck's McDonald's coffee, I was able to travel the express lanes and saved 15 minutes to 20 minutes off of my commute. It's a wonderful thing. I plan to continue doing that. Just a big thank you. It's really going to make a big difference around here. All right, I'll get into this now. So the fiscal year 2025 to 2026 TA set aside, and TA is transportation alternatives. I know we've been talking about mega projects, primary, secondary roadways, transit, HRT funds and such. This is a different look at our multimodal infrastructure system. So the, excuse me, the background on this, I want to provide a little bit of this first, is that the funding that is used for this program was most recently updated in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which continued the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program from the FAST Act back in 2015. And this program it's a biennial process. So for this year, or for this process right now, is fiscal year 25 and 26 monies are being allocated. Now, the next opportunity or chance to submit an application for the TA set aside program would be October 1st of 2025. A lot of eligible project categories here. I would say the most common are the applications we typically receive. We have a few this year from Safe Routes to School program, recreational trails program. We get quite a few there, and probably the majority is on-road and off-road bicycle and pedestrian facilities, a lot of sidewalk projects and such. But we do receive other types of projects, and just wanted to highlight that so you can understand that there are quite a few different eligible projects for this program. Now, let's go through the schedule here a bit. So the applications for this current process, they were due October 1st of 23. And these are done through the VDOT Smart Portal. The October to December timeframe, VDOT's Local Assistance Division actually coordinates the whole application process, and they score all the projects. Once those projects are scored, we receive scorecards, which you'll find in your agenda. All the scorecards for the projects that were submitted this round are listed there if you want any additional information on them. And then the HRTPO does receive those scores, and we put together some charts and things and information. And then our CTB member, Mr. Stant, sat down with us a couple times to recommend his TA set-aside projects and allocations to bring to this board. In February 23rd of 24, our TPS, or our Transportation Programming Subcommittee, they recommended a set of TA set-aside projects and allocations for our TTEC, our technical committee, to consider. Our technical committee did meet on March 6th, but we did not have a quorum, so they weren't able to provide a recommendation to the TPO board on projects and allocations. So we brought it straight to the board, and that's where we are today. And so we have a list of projects and allocations. We're hoping to be able to include to send off to VDOT for the draft 25 to 36 year program. Then in June, our CTB will award the projects. Here's the money we're dealing with. So the HRTPO, and this is for both years, combines 25 and 26. The HRTPO has $13.6 million to allocate. Our Hampton Roads District CTB member had $4.1 million. So we're looking at total funding available of $17.7 million. This is a huge increase over what we typically have. Because of the IIJA, there were some additional monies in the program, and so we're the beneficiaries of that. Now, our CTB member can allocate funds to projects in the Hampton Roads metropolitan planning area, but also in the Hampton Roads Construction District. Those aren't exactly the same. There are a couple localities in the construction district that aren't necessarily part of the MPA for Hampton Roads. And then the CTB and the CTB at-large members and the secretary may award funding in our area as well, and they have not made those allocations yet. That looks like about the April timeframe when they'll sit down and talk about that. The total TA set aside in the last round, so we did this a couple years ago, and this includes CTB allocations and TPO allocations, was $5.7 million. So that's a huge jump you can see that we have to work with this time. So where there's more money, there's more ask. So that's typically how this goes. So for our current round, there were some updates to the program. And one of the major updates was for projects that are funded, they have to receive 100% of the TA requests. I'll get into a very busy spreadsheet here in a minute to show you that, but up to the cap. And the cap is for each project, this also went up, was $2.5 million. That's the lifetime cap for projects receiving money under the TA set-aside program. So the issue with this, though, is if a project has to receive full funding, or their full ask for funding, or it's no funding at all. That's one of the bigger changes. So you'll see why why that comes into play here in a minute when I get into the spreadsheet of the recommended funding allocations. Just at the bottom of the slide here, if you'd like to dig into this a little more and take a look at some information, I've provided a link to our website here. You can go there and find out a little more about the entire program and the history of it as well. Easy to see, right? Okay, well, I'll try to use my little pointer here, and this at least highlights it. I was hoping that this would not just highlight, that it would make it bigger. Oh well, Anyway, I'll get into it. You do have a copy of this in your agenda. It might be a little easier for you to read. This will be tough for me to read even from here. First of all, I'm going to go through all the pieces, a lot to unpackage here. I'm going to go through the pieces of this spreadsheet. These are all of the projects that were submitted for this process for this round. All right. So just going through each of the columns here. So, we have our jurisdiction here, the project name, the score, the max is 250 for the maximum score, then the district ranking, the total cost of the project, followed by the request. Now, this is the total amount requested. And then we have the CTB member, the allocations he's made on projects, and then what our TPS subcommittee made on these projects. And then there's a balance. If there's a balance out here, that means that project is not fully funded and would not be included. Okay. So at the top section of this spreadsheet here, these are existing projects. These existing projects have already been approved for this program in the last round. The issue here is these projects have requested additional funding, and you'll see that in the TA request here. It's probably my cursor over there. So this is the request for these existing projects. And the next section we have here, these are new projects. These new projects were all scored and ranked. So if we look at starting from the top here, the district ranking is 1, 2, 5, 9, 14, and then we get into all the new projects and going on down the line. This first project listed here being the highest ranked new project. This is the Suffolk project on the Seaboard Coastline Trail. Now, one of the things I wanted to mention as well is that you see in the blue highlighted area here, these two projects, these are both Safe Routes to School projects. And the maximum score that could be received for these projects is 125. So you can see here at the 112 and just over 100. The projects actually scored pretty well, but they're down the list because the total score is less. So that puts them down at number 16 and 17. The last thing I wanted to highlight on this spreadsheet here these are non-HRTPO projects. So in the orange here, these are still in the Hampton Roads Construction District, as I mentioned earlier. And there's a project in Emporia. It's pedestrian accommodations on US 58. And then Accomack, Northampton PDC. This is on the Eastern Shore Trail, and they have had some funding needs as well. At the very bottom of the chart, and once again, if you wanted to follow in your agenda, if you want to look at the chart there, it's a little easier. There's about $327,000 left in the reserve after the allocations that you see in these two columns here, the CTB and the HRTPO. Okay, I'm gonna try to be as clear as possible. If you need any clarification on anything, please stop me if there's anything that I missed here. Sir. Yep.
Along the question or statement you made, you said that if there is a balance, that means that the project is not being funded.
I'm sorry.
You were pointing out your different columns, and you
thanks,
said
Bob.
if there's a balance over there, it means the project is not being funded. Is that correct or not?
That's correct.
All right.
Yeah.
It's not being funded under this proposed project selection?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And thanks, Bob, for the assist on my pointer. Yeah, this makes it a little bit better. Thank you very much. Okay, so if you go down that last column there, you were mentioning, Mayor, the first project listed here, this is a Newport News project. Funding request 1.5 million. Our CTB member allocated 645, the remainder from TPO, balance is 0. Same thing, Williamsburg, Collegewood Circuit, funding request 1.9 between the CTB and the TPO. That funding ask was fully funded, and a balance of 0, and then on down the line. Now, where we get to the ones that have a balance, this project right here for Newport News,
Which I'll actually speak on when I get the chance about
Okay,
the $90,000.
Yep, yeah, this one here is has allocated 1.3 million of the 1.4. Remaining balance 92,000. Have that in the agenda. I've called that out. We'll get to that in just a moment. And then the last project on this existing list here, also Newport News, Birthplace of America Trail. This actually is duly listed. It requested funding, and all the projects you see on this spreadsheet that have the kind of the pink highlighting on it, these were also requested funding under our carbon reduction program, which I presented on a couple of months ago here. And so that particular project did receive CRP funding. So this one doesn't need any funding from TA set aside. And then as you go down the list here, you see that the first 5 projects receive funding. That gets us down to York County. And then after that, it jumps down to Chesapeake, which received full funding on one of the preferred projects that they had here for the Great Bridge Boulevard sidewalk. Let me jump to the next slide real quick. I'm going to throw some options out here for you, okay? So as I mentioned earlier, if a project has that balance, then it doesn't receive any funding at all right? So I've called out the project here, the one in Newport News. It would need $92,000 to be fully funded. And we're going to look for an action from the board to take on for one of these options here. So allocate 92,000 from the reserve, which we have 327,000 available to fully fund that project, and that would move forward. Second option, return the TPS recommended allocation. It was 1.3. Thirdly, fully fund another project on the list of new projects, and the next one up, I think, would be Gum Road in Chesapeake. It's right about 1.2 million required to fully fund that project. So those are the 3 options on the table, and I'm just going to jump back to this. It'll take a second, sorry. Jump back to the table here, and so I'm looking for some input on that, which way we want to go. So I'll leave it to you all at this point.
All right, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to recap, Newport News submitted 5 projects, and the recommendation from the subcommittee is to fund 3 of those projects. So the one in question is our 3rd project. As a reminder, it sits in the middle. It's going to help us connect not only to York County, but also to James City County. So it's important to us. The most important thing is it's only a deficit of about $92,000, and we have that in the reserve account. So would love to make a motion that we move the funds from the reserve account to fully fund that delta of $92,000, Mr. Chair.
And I would support that. Seeing a project that's got that much support go away because of the 92,000 when we have the balance, I think would be an unwise move. So I would join Mayor Jones in that. Bob, what would be the best way to handle that? Would a motion here or?
Yes, we would actually need that action today. As Mr. Mahaley outlined, that was the first option that he provided. And it would be appropriate for the board to consider that motion. You would need a second and then action.
Mayor Jones, would you like to make that as a formal motion?
I would, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, it's been properly moved by Mayor Jones, seconded by Mayor Alexander. Any other discussion on that? That's to allocate 92,000 from the $327,343 available balance. Any questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, no. And that is carried. So that project will be funded. Mr. Crum?
Yes, that moves us on to approval of the consent agenda. Mr. Chairman, I would ask for the board to take action to approve today's consent agenda, reminding everyone that it does include item 18.I as distributed at your place.
All right, I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda as modified.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, properly moved, seconded. If no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, no. And it is Carried. Anything else, Mr. Crum?
I'll just quickly say that we will not have a meeting next month. It will be HR TAC meeting month, but we'll be back in May. And just a quick reminder, our PDC meeting does start at 12:30. We have lunches over for everybody behind our reception area. At the PDC meeting, we're going to talk about housing. We're going to talk about resiliency design standards, and we're going to talk about regional energy needs in our community.
Very good. Thank you all. And since the meeting went over, we will blame that on the Navy as well. Have a great day. We are adjourned.
No, I'm glad you're Army.